I was just astounded by the reaction I had to the ending as opposed to some other people. And that was my reaction, is that he thinks he's talking to the American people, but he's not.
He's saying, I serve you power, I have done your bidding, power.
And he's confused.
Yeah.
He's lost track of, is it for his wife? Is it for the American people? Ultimately, and we've talked about this, I think it's a movie about addiction. I think it's a love story wrapped in addiction, and I think that's what that moment is.
I wonder, we were talking about this last month, because you're talking about power, and he's serving power, he's beholden to power, he's wrapped up and twisted by power. Early on in the film, ideology just seems to be not necessarily the thing, and I think some people have people question that, like, no, this guy had some core beliefs.
Oh, yeah.
This guy, was firm on what he stood for. But you see early on in that scene with Carell, when he's asking Rumsfeld, oh, what do we believe anyway? And I love the reaction from Carell there. It's just like, believes. There, yeah. So that was your take on it.
We did a lot of research, and we read a lot of interviews, and we had our own journalists go around. I could find no operating ideology. It shifted constantly. He and Rumsfeld were against the Vietnam War because it was convenient, against Kissinger, and then during the Ford years, Kissinger became more of a pacifist, so they suddenly were hawkish, and it just flips all over the place. So I was talking to some journalists the other day, we were doing an interview, and I go, I know it's not the interpretation you want to hear, but like, I think ideology gives us some comfort. Like, oh, there's an operating belief system there, but to me, the image I will always remember from the movie is the hyenas with the night vision goggles. And I think this kind of addiction to power cracks open really animalistic, dark stuff. And I think our structure, our society doesn't want to acknowledge that there is still a part of us. I remember years ago someone telling me that, for 100,000 years, when mankind would be upset with something, we would bite someone. We would literally, mankind has a really strong bite. And that's why people today grind their teeth or they get sore jaws, because they want to bite the people that make them mad. And this is true. This is actually true. And my interpretation, and Hank and our interpretation was, this is animalistic, dark stuff. And the people who have argued with me about this, I just say, look at the world we're living in right now. We have a spray-tanned orange reality star who, lies, 8,000 lies, and all they seem to do is sadistically, put kids in cage. I mean, this is dark stuff. This is like William Blake kind of stuff that's going on now. So that was our interpretation. Now, we're not saying it's the definitive interpretation. There's some great books that have been written, and they should all be read, and that was our interpretation.
Right. As you say, other people could watch that, other people could watch the speech, other people could look at his actions, you can look at Lynn Cheney in this movie and find a woman, who's very, you could sympathize with her. She's smart, capable, and yet she has to kind of hitch her wagon to this guy. I guess and I was talking to Amy Adams last week, she told me there was a whole section of your movie, 20 minutes of young Dick, young Lynn, that opened the film. And like that big scene of Lynn reading the riot act to Dick, she thought there was like a big runway coming up to that, where you kind of understood Lynn Cheney's laser focus. Instead, Amy just blows in like a hurricane. How is the decision made to excise that? And, as I was telling you, Hank, before we came out here, I could spend hours just because there's so much in this movie and so many decisions, obviously, you had to make to craft it, you guys. How long did you spend in the editing room on this?
7 months, I think.
7 months.
6 years we were in the editing room.
7 months that felt like
But
6
we'd
years.
stumble out to the parking lot at 1 or 2 in the morning, just trying to figure this thing out.
Well, I mean, ultimately, what drew me to the story and what attracted me to the story of Dick Cheney is that it's a story that mirrors the progression of America. He's a normal kid from a town in Wyoming who just wants to make the girl he loves proud. And that moment where he calls her, and he's in the White House and says, "You'll never guess where I'm calling from." I feel like we've all had moments like that in our life. I mean, it's obviously not the White House. But somehow in the arc of America, that kind of, local boy makes good, makes his wife proud kind of thing, became something much darker. Became a quest for power and control, a desire to cover up the parts of ourselves that we don't want the world to see, and have led us to this place of borderline madness that we're in right now. And that's what, when I started reading the story of Dick Cheney, and I read all the books that were written by all these great journalists like Jane Mayer and Barton Gellman and Ron Suskind, and on, David Korn and Isikoff, that's what struck me about it. This is really a story of that American desire to make good, that ambition, and how it twisted into something much darker. So for Hank and I in the edit room, it was a matter of how much do you have to show of that love story. And we loved the stuff with the teenagers when they were young. We loved it so much, but the audience kind of got it quickly.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, I get it. He's crazy about it. We don't need to see 20 minutes about that.
Yeah, no, it actually became a structural thing, and it weighed the film down really unnecessarily. It was beautiful in and of itself, and if you guys ever, if you cut film or if you shoot film, you're going to find that your heart will be broken many times when you have to lose things you love. And we did love that.
We did, and it'll be in the release of the movie. It'll be on the DVD. It'll be on the iTunes. We actually cut it as a short film, so you can actually see it as a short film, and it's beautiful. I mean, Greg Fraser is an amazing DP. This guy's an amazing editor. The actors are incredible, and it's definitely. I mean, there's part of me that would have loved to have shown it as a short film before the feature. Yeah, it would have been really cool. Yeah.
But at the last minute, Adam was like, let's put Shakespeare back in. And we did. Shakespeare never worked. We could never figure it out. So we just kept pounding away.
Well, we came up with that new intro, which was the kind of dissemination about history tilting. But the big thing was it was a key character moment. We had to have it. It was the moment where Dick said to Lynn, now this is what we're all in it for. So it was always hovering around the movie. It was always kind of waiting to jump back in. It wasn't quite that random, but it was.
No, but it was like the superhero. We needed it.
Yeah.
We actually needed it.
I mean, I think the big thing with this movie was that we were kind of going for it. We're like living in these times that are so insane, and we're all wondering how in God's name did we get here? And we sort of picked this shadowy, mysterious character to kind of guide us through let's face it, we live in the era of the Republican Revolution. I mean, the Reagan Revolution hasn't ended. We're still living in that time. And he was kind of the perfect face, the ultimate bureaucrat who floated through all these decades. So there was always a big swing to this movie, and the way it's shot, you can tell that, the way it's edited, we just embraced.
Well, part of that embracing comes in test screening the movie. Like Hank, I read a quote from you saying, test screenings are anathema. You hate test screenings, or maybe you've learned to love them with this guy. I don't know, but you kind of rarely among filmmakers, because you come from an improv background, as you mentioned, you love to hear what an audience is responding to and kind of get a feel for the movie that way. Have you changed your mind? Has he put you on board?
I mean, when other people aren't judging the film, if a test screening superficially isn't working, we're learning stuff. This is what I've learned from Adam. You can, in a test screening, you don't need to see the scores. You just need to experience the film the way the audience is experiencing it. And Adam is remarkable in that he can actually see it through other people's eyes.
So what did test screenings teach you about this movie as you were going through the process of crafting?
It's more about, like Hank said, we're not looking at scores, we're not looking at any of that stuff. It's just, we all know it. When you're in a crowd and you're watching a musical performance, a play, a movie, you can just feel that energy, and there's nothing like it. I mean, it's the best to sit in a crowd. And that doesn't mean that you chase every little deviation of that energy. It doesn't mean that, like, when energy goes down, you go, we have to fix that. I mean, you don't want to be that reactive. But overall, you want a sense of what this thing is generating in a crowd and where we're headed to. And, you know, there was a version of this movie very early on that was like, what, 2 hours, 40 minutes longer that we loved. And there were portions of the audience that loved it, but it wasn't, there were also, you know, you could feel the energy going away. So we wanted to kind of find that compromise between the sweep of what we were trying to tell and at the same time the energy of the viewing experience, because we weren't making this movie to be some obscure experience for the audience. We wanted people to see this movie and respond to it.
How many test screenings did you have?
114. What did we do? Like 6 or 7, and then we would do ones that were for our friends.
Yeah.
We would do little ones in theaters, which are every bit as valuable, especially when they're filmmakers. You can feel it with 5 or 6 people in the room. Yeah.
Yeah. So Hank, you mentioned earlier, there are things that you cut and they break your heart. What broke your heart about this? What did you cut?
I know, you're asking an editor this?
You know, we had this wonderful musical number.
Oh, I'm with you on that.
It was surreal. It was fun. You had Carell and Bill walking through Congressional Cafeteria, and the place just breaks out into song and dance. And you had Brittany Howard from the Alabama Shakes singing. You had the choreographer from Hamilton. You had incredible music. Our
You'll
composer.
never get to see it.
We'll make it short.
By the way, it didn't work.
Well, it was great by itself.
It was great, but it did not work. Yeah.
So you hired the choreographer from Hamilton. You hired the lead singer from Alabama Shakes. You spent obviously a lot of time and perhaps money staging this great musical number. Why didn't it work? Where was it in the movie?
I'll tell you exactly. It was in the early second act, and despite all the amazing footage that we shot, the scene where Rumsfeld tells him about bombing Cambodia did what that scene was supposed to do, only better. You could really taste the power in your mouth of being in those hallways and gossiping in the White House about Cambodia. So as much noise as, you know, as great as the musical was, it didn't hit. I love that scene talking about Cambodia. It's one of my favorite scenes in the movie. And Hank and I realized at one point it's either or. You either cut that scene or you put that in. And our goal at that point was to show a young man feeling that rush, feeling that sense of the power that's in that crappy little building in Washington, D.C., and that was what was important. So story always wins. I mean, it's as much as we do really cool shots, and we had Greg Fraser, our DP, who's one of the best out there working, and no one cuts better than Hank, and oh my God, Brittany Howard from now. I mean, all of it was amazing, but story always wins.
So will that be on the DVD?
That one, just out of pure spite, I won't put on the DVD. No one will ever see it. No, that'll be on the DVD as well. We have the short film of them when they're young and the musical. Those are the two big things that we cut. Yeah.
What about the decisions just in the editing room to kind of juxtapose different images, different things? Is that, how much time goes into that? And is that like a sort of a process of discovery? And
Well, can I take this?
No.
Sure. No, you know, the thing is, all the information, the factual stuff was really vetted. But how you get into a character, how into the humaneness and the humanity of the character is something else. We never, you know, for me, one of the huge problems with biopics is they're always like third person. You're watching this biopic. You're watching Jamie Foxx, you know, playing the piano, and you're acutely aware of it. So what I wanted to do, and Adam shot this stuff. He shot like human moments, just regular human moments that we can all relate to. One example, when Colin Powell was addressing the United Nations, and then afterwards he said something. What did he say? That this is the
Well, it ends with him saying thank you to the UN.
Right.
And then we have voiceovers saying later, Colin Powell would call this one of the most painful moments of his career. And by the end, 70% of Americans believe that Saddam Hussein was involved in 9/11.
So it's really dark and really sad, and then you just go to a shot that Adam shot. That you have the family at an outdoor dinner, and they're just all relating. And Dick Cheney is the goofy grandpa, and they're talking. They're talking about American Idol and the merits of American Idol, and you can actually you just relate to these characters as human beings. So when you juxtapose, when you put together back to back these really factual images and factual scenes against these emotional scenes, you get something synergistic. It's much bigger. And that's what we discovered.
That scene just, I was telling you earlier that I'd watched it a second time with my wife. That scene absolutely chilled her to the core.
I think it's one of the
The
great
one that you just described.
I think it's one of my favorite moments in the movie, and I think, you know, this whole movie, the way we started this movie was really a search for answers. Like, we didn't know. Dick Cheney never has said anything emotionally about where he comes from. His wife says a little bit in her autobiography. But the whole movie was like a search for Dick Cheney, a search for America. How did we end up here? And that moment, I really think, where you go from Colin Powell saying, we should invade Iraq. And I remember people, when that happened, saying, oh, Colin Powell said we should do it. And you just go to that family. What I love is, it's not giving you answers, it's questions. It's questions about, what do we value? What is it really all about? Our family, our backyard? Do we care about the truth? And there's so many questions that shot out of that juxtaposition when we got in there, that I feel like relate to where we are now. What is important? Is there a bigger picture than our family? Is there a bigger picture than our neighborhood? What's driving us? What do we care about? Yeah, the first time I saw it, I teared up, because it just felt like, that's it. I mean, that's where America is. We go and we unleash this savage bloodshed on a foreign nation for no reason whatsoever. By some estimates, kill as much as 1 million people. And this guy is with his family having his dinner, and they're laughing, and that's the contradiction of American life with these decisions.
Yeah, I mean, and I think what a lot of people take away from this movie is we need to pay more attention.
Yeah, and I think of course we need to pay more attention. We need to value our great journalists, and we need to be active citizens. I also think it's like a question about just underlying values. Like, what are we aiming towards in the United States? What are we driving towards? And this includes myself. There's some people that are like, oh, Adam McKay thinks he's so above this. No. No, I'm part of this. Like, I grew up in this society. I don't know. I have a blind spot about it as well. But just this idea that America is for freedom and goodness, and we're, which I think we have been through certain periods in our history. I mean, we created the middle class in America. That's a huge thing with unions, and we were a champion of human rights for a stretch, but not during this time, man. We tortured people. We invaded a country for no reason. We filled oil companies' coffers. You know, these are facts. This happened. So it's hard for us too making this, and we don't have definitive, clear answers. We just kind of, you and I in that edit room just dove into kind of the question mark of it all, right? Yeah.
How much time and thought went into just the choosing of the images that you would use? Even like we were backstage looking at the images at the end of the movie, the family around the dinner table with how much, I mean, there were so many different ways you could go in choosing those particular images to
Well,
highlight about where we are right now and where we've come.
You know, each time you use an image, it's like a chess move. And you know, if you change out the image, the whole game changes. You know, so you know, we spend a lot of time.
A lot of time.
I
It's
just
down to see them,
that is Adam.
Well, that ended up becoming the key because we, in our early screenings, we would show these images of where America's at, and people thought, oh, they're saying Dick Cheney did all of this. We're like, no, we're not saying that. We're saying that, I mean, the movie is really two portraits. It's Dick Cheney and it's also the rise of, it's the Reagan Revolution, which also overflowed into the Democratic Party. Like, I mean, it's a bigger change in America. So Hank and I were playing with that the whole time. Like, I think really what those images show, yeah, some of them are connected to Dick Cheney directly, like the Syrian refugees and global warming. Cheney did a lot to stop action on global warming. But the other things like shootings and the opioid crisis are a general loss of faith in government. I mean, it's a belief that we have that's been stoked by very moneyed interests that government is weakness, that collective action is weakness, it's dangerous, and our government doesn't seem to be able to solve anything right now, and no one seems to even expect it to. You know, when you have 75,000 people a year dying from opioids, and they're legally sold and prescribed, and you have 30 to 35,000 people a year dying from guns, these are pretty basic things that you can handle with a government, but it doesn't seem to be happening. So Hank and I played with that a lot, and there were some people that are like, oh, they're saying that Dick Cheney did all of this. No, it was supposed to be a larger kind of swath of history that was leading us here.
This conversation just reminded me, it's so light in tone, that Vice was Golden Globe nominated for a comedy.
We took out the laugh track at the last second. I don't know, those Hollywood Foreign Press were like, how is this a comedy? How is it a drama? I'm like, the example I gave them was like if you were on the Titanic and you were the last person on the prow. Is that what you call the front of the boat? It sounds good. Anyway, what do you call it? Bow. The bow. Prow, just something. You're the last person on the bow, and the ship is about to sink, and you just heard for 3 or 4 months how it's the most unsinkable ship ever built. Do you laugh or cry? I told the Hollywood Foreign Press, I laugh. I just go like, this is crazy that this is happening. So I told them, that's kind of like, it's horrifying and also just ludicrous where we're at. And the other example I always give is like Donald Trump being up in those forests when after all those horrible fires and he was really and
Pleasure.
Gavin Newsom at the time, the governor-elect, and he just says, we need to rape the forest more. We need to rape them more. So this is the craziest shit I've ever seen. Is that funny or is that horrifying? I honestly can't answer it. So, sure, comedy's great. Murder mystery's great. Like, musical, you could call it a musical even though there's no music in it. Like,
Not anymore.
Yeah. In fact, I'm calling it a musical from now on, just to spite my blood.
Well, I mean, even in the darkest dark scenes in this movie, there's still just little comic moments. I was watching it backstage again, and like when Corellis Rumsfeld comes into Cheney's office at the end, and this guy is just, he's carrying himself like this, you know, and he bumps his leg on the, I mean, it's just funny. I mean, he's reached this point of, and it's and you know, every time I see, anytime I'm at an event and they show a clip for this film, it was last weekend in Santa Barbara Film Festival, and it's often something of Sam Rockwell and she.
Sure.
The Rockwell is Bush.
So good. Oh my
Yeah.
God, he's amazing.
I mean, every scene is just, those early scenes, those early courtship scenes were magic.
I always point to the moment where I knew something was really off with America was the first debate between Gore and Bush. I was at Saturday Night Live, and we were watching it. I was with like 4 or 5 friends, and we're like, this is embarrassing. Like, this is great. I'm not the biggest Al Gore lover ever. And I walked out in the hallway, and I was just talking to people, like, are you watching this? And there were other people that came up to me and were like, yeah, Bush is great. And I remember looking in their eyes, and it was like Black Mirror. It was like, it was a gas leak. And I guess they did not go well after that. Anyway.
Nah. Well, you were saying about biopics and how typically you see the actor, as as the person he's depicting, or she. And here, I guess I'm wondering, did you guys ever see Christian Bale until?
He's a spooky guy. No, and he was always Dick Cheney. Now when I see video clips of the real Dick Cheney, something looks wrong.
And did you, you've worked with him before, did you expect that spooky level of disappearance?
It blew me away. I knew he was one of the great actors working out there, and I knew he was going to go for it. That first day where everything lined up with the makeup, all his preparation, his weight, everything, and really the underplayed part of it is the psychological understanding of Cheney. Every movement, every little gesture, he's found the motivation for. I'll never forget it. I was joking with our EP, Robin Woolley. It's like he's not playing him, he summoned him. And it felt like that. And all the crew would talk about it. When you would walk around on set, you'd get a little shiver when you would walk by. I've never experienced anything like it in years of doing this.
He summoned, that reminds me of his, was it at the Golden Globes where he thanked Satan for yeah. Summoned.
Listen, it's credited. It's credits. Yeah. He's an associate producer. Lucifer McClan. He's in there.
Well, even in just the smallest moments, we were talking about the Shakespeare scene, but it's the scene of them in the bathroom right before it, where he's got the mouthwash going, and it's just, you can see those wheels spinning, and even in the way he's swishing the mouthwash around, it's just like very, I don't know, there's just something to it. But I love how you were talking about earlier too, that early scene, we're talking about innocence and just being twisted by power. That early scene of him in that nondescript, shitty office, but a moment of pride that he's made it to the White House. Yeah, we could all, I love, and the office is so cramped that like the chair is like about this much space for him. And that's where he began, and that would have been almost enough. And I guess it plays into the mid-movie closing credits.
Yeah.
That would have been his happy ending.
Yeah, the one scene to me that is like one of the lines of dialogue that we always talked about that were really important was when he says to his young daughters, they're like, is it a good trick we're playing on the fish or a bad trick? I was like, well, it's not good or bad, it's fishing. We find out what the fish wants, and then our family gets to eat. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's the center of the entire movie, is this is a guy who, there's a lot of people that get really excited by power, and they get excited by moving forward. But this is a guy who had extra gifts, like, his wife Lynn is really smart, really motivated. Donald Rumsfeld, certainly ambitious. But those guys didn't have that subtle sort of patience that Cheney had. He so saw the long game. In fact, there's a quote, which we played with putting in the movie, but it was so on the head we didn't put it in, which is Lynn Cheney said, if you want to understand my husband, there's only one thing you have to know, he's a fly fisherman. And it's really kind of what made him remarkable above everyone else, and that's how he was able to see that the vice presidency could be an opportunity. There's no one else saw that except him.
Thank you for joining us tonight, Hank, Adam. Thank you for joining us.